I think the initial gut reaction of the Great Resignation was people were leaving their professions for something happier, like, hey, I'm going to quit my job as an accountant, I'm going to go sell surfboards somewhere. We found that wasn't really the case. Find something that you can feel so passionate about that you almost are in borderline of crying for. Remember, a debit card will allow you to pay that cash up front and get that massive discount. And that debit card is supplied by Sidecar Health, not out of your own pocket. So that's one way that we're saving money. We are trying to not just educate people on what healthcare and health insurance should be. It's almost like a re-education. Right now, we all follow the system that's been in place for decades, and it's barely working.
We are here with Rich Adao, head of talent at Sidecar Health, a tech startup on a mission to make healthcare more affordable for all, giving consumers control over cost and choices. The company was recognized by Forbes as one of America's best startups for employees in 2022. Rich has had extensive experience in building and leading teams and recruiting for companies like Google and Facebook and Udemy, and I'm excited to have him on with us today. Rich, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Could you just start by telling us more about Sidecar Health, your role, and previous experiences that led you there?
Luckily, I do this for a living, so hopefully I'll do my best on this call as I'm being recorded. So Sidecar Health, if you think about how healthcare is done today, it's a broken system, let's be honest. For example, if you were to go in, get care, get an MRI at a hospital, you are blindly not even knowing what you're going to get charged. You give them your health insurance card and you have no idea what's going to happen. So what Sidecar Health is trying to do is make healthcare more affordable and accessible for all through transparency and timing of pricing. 9 out of 10 times when you go to your hospital admin and give them cash up front, they would give you sometimes a 30 to 60% discount because they don't have to go through that lovely claims process on who's paying what. The members paying 10%, the health insurance carriers paying 90%. Usually that process takes about 3 to 6 months. So the hospital usually won't even get paid for 3 to 6 months. So they would readily give the patient a discount for cash up front. So Sidecar Health would give the member a debit card will allow you to pay that cash up front and get that massive discount. And that debit card is supplied by Sidecar Health, not out of your own pocket. So that's one way that we're saving money. The other, transparency and pricing. So think about DoorDash, that kind of app where you already know that Sidecar Health is going to give you $1,000 for that MRI on your shoulder. You can look on the app where you can see Kaiser, $900. This other hospital down the street, $1,100. This other hospital down the street, $1,000. Now, hypothetically, if you get the care at Kaiser, at $900, and you get $1,000 of care, you would get $100 credit to your debit card. So the reason why we're called Sidecar Health, long way of me saying, is you are now in the driver's seat of your healthcare. We are the sidecar to help guide you along the way, but you get to make decisions. Because right now we make no decisions with healthcare. We go to the hospital that's in our network, by the way, we don't have a network, and you have no idea what it's going to cost until 2 weeks after you get the care and you get this random bill for the whole thing. Now you get some choices. So it's going to change the playing field on everything. It's creating a marketplace, so hospitals and care providers will have to up their game on providing care at discounts. And so they're going to have to do right by us too. Well, right now they can do whatever they want and charge us whatever they want. So that's Sidecar Health in a nutshell. Hopefully I see a lot more applicants from everybody on this podcast.
Super disruptive company. And Rich, if you could just touch on some of your previous experiences too that led you here.
Yeah, I'll be much more quicker with this. So right before this, I was at Udemy, ed tech company, rivals that of Coursera, 10 times better than Coursera, by the way. When I started in 2017, we're 150 employees. By the time I left 3 months ago, we're about 1,400 employees and became a public company in October of last year. So wonderful ride, taking it from tiny startup to 1,400 and a public company. Before that, I was at a startup called Machine Zone, which was a video game company that also had real-time platform technology that they were trying to use for real-time advertising and smart cities. Before that, I was at Facebook for a year, and before that, I was at Google for about 5 years. And before that, I was an agency recruiter. And before that, I was a financial analyst out of college at Motorola, way back in the early 2000s.
Very cool. So you've had quite a journey.
A little bit.
So So, the approach to employer brand strategy has experienced some intense shifts over the past few years and has forced companies to consider the heightened level that it plays in, in today's employee attraction and retention. So, from your experience, whether that's being the candidate or being the employer, what does it look like to build a strong employer brand, and what is your advice for startups on how to go about this?
No, this is a great question. Employer brand. I mean, first of all, you have to really have everything squared away internally, meaning, do you as employees know what your core values are? Do you have a stance on what the company believes for DEI and belonging internally? So I think making sure you get that discussed amongst the company, starting from the
Mhm.
leaders down on everybody else, and agreeing what value system you guys have and what those actual values are, actually putting pen to paper, so to speak. And then you can actually start promoting the brand. So establishing the brand is, of course, step number one. Number two, you have to make sure that you believe it internally, because there's no way you're going to get anybody else to believe it if you don't. So that's a huge step one. Number two, it depends on your budget. I think making sure that you have collaboration. If you've got strong marketing teams or comms teams internally, I think that's key. Making sure that you're working together on ideas that you can share, some free ways. If you're using an agency, social media, there's also many tools like um, built in. There's built in Colorado, built in San Francisco. That's a good one. Glassdoor could be your best friend or your worst enemy. Same thing with LinkedIn. So that's why I always say make sure you kind of fix your internal values first.
Mhm.
That's going to reflect on things like Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and even newer ones like Blind. You know, people love to talk. Social media creates
Mhm.
a lot of chatter these days. So it's almost about making sure your system
Mhm.
matters before you promote it externally. And then from a recruiting standpoint, if you do have the luxury of being able to build a sourcing function, making sure that your sourcers have the right kind of messaging to promote yourself externally and things to point to, articles, maybe op-eds or white papers on things about your company. Those are always reliable and very vetted sources that you can give to candidates too. So I think all of that matters, and especially if you do have a budget for an agency,
Mhm.
that's a whole other conversation we can open into.
So now, Sidecar made it to the list of best startups for employees in 2022, which is sure a very coveted list, especially in today's hiring climate. But what are the key reasons you believe Sidecar made it to this list, and what gets your candidates most excited about coming to work for you guys?
I think one, our mission, it's fixing a super broken system in the United States
Mhm.
where we are trying to not just educate people on what healthcare and health insurance should be. It's almost like a re-education.
Mhm.
Right now, we all follow the system that's been in place for decades, and it's barely working. Right? Healthcare is a $4 trillion industry. Not much of those dollars are going towards health or care or R&D of those things. So we need to change systematically about how we're doing this. So I think mission is number one. It also doesn't hurt that we're very, very popular with venture capitalists. And if you look us up on Crunchbase and TechCrunch, we've raised nearly $170 million. Only been in business for a handful of years, since 2018, 2019. So went through a Series C round of funding. Series D round of funding is around the corner, and we're also getting a lot of good conversations with VCs for Series D. So I think that doesn't hurt either. To already be valued at $1 billion in a short period of time, 3 to 4 years, is not too shabby. Now, actually, one of the reasons why I answered the recruiter's call initially, I just before even knowing what Sidecar Health did, I saw they went through a Series C in a few years, already valued at $1 billion this early on. Usually it takes companies what 6, 7 years to get to this point. We're already there, so that instantly piqued my interest personally. So I think those two factors, the mission, how we're doing well financially with VC funding, probably got us on that list. On top of that, of course, culture. Everybody at this company is super jazzed about our mission, and that in itself creates a culture of urgency and, hey, let's just do the right thing.
Now, the reason why candidates will select one job over another today has changed drastically from previous years. So it doesn't seem to be as simple as, oh, I like the company name or I'll just make more money here. Even though those are still factors, it's not necessarily the deciding factor. And I know you kind of even touched on this in your previous answer a little bit, but what do you think motivates candidates in 2022? And how do you think this differs from previous years?
You know, my team and I at Udemy, when we were going through this, probably with the rest of you, it, hearing about the great resignation, we're all of us as recruiting leaders are figuring out where was everybody going and why.
Mm.
Now, I think the initial gut reaction of the Great Resignation was people were leaving their professions for something happier, like, hey, I'm going to quit my job as an accountant. I'm going to go sell surfboards somewhere. We found that wasn't really the case. People were just leaving the majority,
Hmm.
leaving their current positions for just better positions in the same industry
Mm.
and line of work. They're finding that better accounting position, that better legal role, better engineering role where they were getting maybe the same or more compensation, but also flexibility of where they can do this work. I think that's the big one. We can all count on just one hand how many big employers are asking people to come in to an office setting, especially in the software industry, 5 days a week. I think the companies that did not adjust to this back in March, April of 2020 are the ones that are struggling the most with getting top talent. I think the winners are the ones that maybe initially you didn't think that working from home was going to work, but they had the agility to think twice and think about this new world that we're creating for ourselves and realizing, hey, we've been successful in this short period of time working from home and still being an effective company and building products and making pretty good money and still collaborating. Let's see how much we can push ourselves to do that. So I think the companies that made that adjustment, that actually listened to people, flexibility of work, giving work-life balance back, candidates listened and they went to the companies that were doing that for them. So I think the shorter commuter times too.
Hmm.
If you have a 60-minute commute each way, that's saving 2 hours a day to give back to your life, your loved ones, maybe even just doing more work than sitting in a car for 2 hours, enhancing yourself, learning, investing in your own brain, and doubling down, listening to a podcast. I think we've all realized that time is so much more valuable than it used to be 2 years ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we used to be kind of in a time where where in the interview process, companies were very much focused on vetting for highly qualified technical skill as well as kind of top education pedigree. And while that's obviously still plays a significant factor in the interview process, that used to be the main metric for defining great talent. Has this definition switched? How would you define great talent today? And what does Sidecar do to attract this great talent?
So I think what I'm about to say next definitely resonates a little bit more with startup life for sure. I think the attitude of, hey, that's not my job. People who have that kind of attitude just won't make it in a startup environment or a growing company. So I've learned this a little bit the hard way in the last 2.5 years myself. Agility matters a little bit more than current experience,
Hmm.
right? If you as a leader are willing to train your people, just invest in them a little bit as opposed to just hiring that person you can just take right off the shelf, plug and play, not much training required, zero ramp up needed. If you're willing to invest a little bit in that person who might have a higher ceiling, that person's already plugged in, ready to go, that's better for you in the long run. So, ability to learn, ability to take on more projects and willing to challenge themselves, agility. I mean, let's come on. All of us have had the hugest the pivot that we ever had in our careers since March of 2020. And again, the ones that survived and thrived are the ones that had the ability to just take the hard pivot, be agile, and roll with like the punches we've gotten, right? So ability to learn, do things that aren't necessarily your core job, not complaining about it, and just having a positive attitude and being able to work well when your back's against the wall and not having things that are just perfect like in every facet of your job. So I think those attitudes are personally what I look for more now than assessing all the skills, like the 6 out of 6 that you're looking for somebody. Do they have that exact experience? Do they have the same software that you're running? All that's good and nice, but I will double down on somebody's ability to learn, their agility, positivity over somebody that can do this job on day one. Because I'll invest that they'll be a better employee in 6 months than the 100 times, 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah, and potentially even likely longer to stay. So the switch to a candidates market has highlighted the conversation of what it looks like or means for individuals to be fulfilled at work. What are your thoughts or your advice on this topic of finding meaning and passion at work, whether that's to employees or to employers?
You know, um, so I think I was joking with you, Lisa, earlier, I think before you started recording, that I'm in the process of moving. I mean, hence, like, this is not my everyday office. It's like literally my garage. So I was at a point where I was boxing up my actual desk upstairs, and this is when I was working at Udemy, moving and about to leave that job. I remember putting all my stuff in a box, and I actually started crying a little bit, to be honest with you. And what I realized was, why the heck am I crying? I think putting the stuff in the box represented like how much fun I had in that job. Like I was putting all that, all those wonderful memories away. And I looked at that desk, that chair I sat in, as like my way to like thrive and shine and give value back to hundreds of other people. Hopefully, I was. And that was like my version of my best self. Was coming into work, obviously take care of my family, but coming into work, sitting at a desk and doing what I think I do best and taking some pride in that. I think that is the answer to the question is find something that you can feel so passionate about that you almost are in borderline of crying for, and we spend more time with our coworkers than our spouses, girlfriends, boyfriends, partners, right? So we have to enjoy the people that we work with. I remember saying goodbye to all my coworkers. It was like heart wrenching saying goodbye to everybody, and it should feel that way. When you're leaving a job, you should love it that much where you will miss everybody in it and what you're doing for a living. So I think finding whatever that is for you and identifying your strengths and overlapping that into the job. Like, will you find wins in your job? If the answer is yes, you take that job. If the answer is maybe or no, you think twice. You continue to vet and you take the job that you're passionate about, not the one that's going to pay you the most money. It's a part of the factor, but it's just we spend so much time in our roles where you have to love where you work and who you work with. I
Yeah.
think you got to take that job.
Absolutely. One third of our life is spent at work. I think that's what I read the other day. Last question for you, Rich. So at Solvable, we're all about what drives purpose and meaning for people at work. So I know you did touch on this a little bit already, but what drives purpose and meaning for you at your workplace?
I think I've had the luxury, I mean, being able to work at like legendary companies like Google and Facebook, it's taught me now that what do I care about now? I have 2 kids at home. I want to be able to, like, when I retire and stop working, like, tell them the impact that I was able to have, not just like what I did in my job, but also the companies that I did it at. I think you got to work for a company that has purpose. You really do. That's changing something, right? Like I try to imagine what Google was like probably in 2002, 2003, when it was like up and coming, when it was just a few hundred people, and maybe Facebook around 2006, 2007, like right before the movie. Um, I think it would have been fun to have worked at those places and being a part of legendary company as it was growing. I want to do that at every company I work at for the rest of my career. So, Sidecar Health, great mission. We're changing something that just needs changing. I could feel good about that as a company, and then my impact. Honestly, I don't think I'll ever join a company more than 2,000 employees for the rest of my career. I think I'll always do startups again. And someday, if Sidecar Health gets to 2,000 employees, I will graciously leave and go over to another company and grow that company because I feel like that gives me purpose. And I actually was part of that footnote, maybe get a little bit of a paragraph in Wikipedia that like Rich Adao was there and grew this company from da, 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 da. Like that's what I'm shooting for, right? I don't want to be a cog in the wheel.
Rich, thank you so much for being on with us today. And thank you all for listening to Architects of Contemporary Hiring.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks, everybody.